What's up, everybody? My name is Isaac Huss, coming to you from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and this is Catholic Match Live. I'm here today with a very special guest, my baby sister, Catherine Huss. She's tuning in from sunny San Diego, California. Thanks for coming this evening, Catherine.
So glad to be here.
It's a little bit earlier in the evening for you, correct? What time is it in San Diego?
Only 5. The night is young.
The night is young in Minneapolis at 7 p.m. actually, in large part because I'm a night owl myself, actually. But I think this still qualifies for evening, even on my time. So welcome, everybody. This is our very third Catholic Match Live with me as your host. Thanks so much for tuning in this evening. I brought my sister to talk about dating. Believe it or not, yes, she and I discuss romance in our lives. And if that surprises you, well, you are in the right place, and we're going to talk all about that. But maybe just right now, I'll give you a brief little introduction into this series. So I'm Isaac Huss. I have been partnering with Catholic Match to talk about dating and relationships, and basically not necessarily from an expert's perspective, but simply as a regular guy sharing my perspectives and my experience on this crazy world of dating in 2022. So that's where we're coming from today. We're not here to tell you how it is or how it's supposed to go or how exactly to do this perfectly correct. Instead, we're simply here to kind of just hang out with you guys and to try to figure out maybe some commonalities from where we're coming from, and also maybe just some food for thought in continuing to search for that special someone. Whether you're hot on the trail for the first time, maybe you're returning to the dating game after a while. Wherever you are along the way, we think we have something for everybody this evening. So thanks again so much for having us take up or join you at least for one evening on a Monday. So with that, I'm going to share briefly a little background on myself, and then I'll turn it over to my sister to share from her perspective. So I'm coming to you from Minneapolis. I haven't strayed very far from home, at least currently. I've been born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I have a family of 6 total, 4 siblings. Catherine is my youngest sister, and 2 of our siblings are actually married. So we're the 2 that are still single, and we bond over these sorts of things on occasion. And with that, I guess I'll just turn it over to you, Catherine, and share a little bit about your background and how you went from Minneapolis, where I am and where we grew up, to San Diego.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, like Isaac said, born and raised in Minneapolis, and we are cradle Catholics, so raised in the church. So definitely have spent a lot of time in that context. And I went to school at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota, where I studied both Catholic studies and apparel design. And so I would say for the majority of my life, I've kind of had a foot in both worlds of, the Catholic Christian community, always been a part of the parish I've been with or any young adult groups. My friends and I host a Bible study here. So kind of always had one foot there, but also in the secular world. I went to public school and I work in the fashion industry, a very secular industry. So kind of had a foot in both worlds, which I'm grateful for the perspective to have both. So I went to school in Minnesota. I worked in the fashion industry there for a couple of years. And then, as you can imagine, there are more job opportunities in LA for fashion. So I moved out there. And then once I got a taste of San Diego, I said, all right, I need to settle down here. So that's where I am now, working in fashion and loving life here.
Love it. So one of the things that we're going to talk about, Catherine and I, this evening, is just our shared experience about dating, how our experience has been different, particularly from her womanly perspective. And so while we're going to kind of, again, try to touch on all the subjects to a certain extent and have something for everybody, I'm going to try to bring to the table where I'm coming from as a man. I invited her because she has a feminine genius that I simply cannot even fake if I wanted to. Although I try to fake all sorts of different types of geniuses, believe me. And so I wanted to say that. I also want to say that this is meant to be a conversation. So she and I are going to have a conversation this evening, but we want to we want to include all of you, whether you're coming from Missouri or someplace in Massachusetts called Devens, Elmhurst, Illinois, even Canada, which is not that far from Minneapolis, although I'm still not any good at doing the Canadian accent at this point in my life. But we do have the chat module on the side. We also have the question module kind of down at the bottom. So if you have a particular question for us during this evening, don't be shy. You're not going to interrupt us. I typically don't let anybody ever interrupt me when I'm talking about things, as my younger sister knows. But seriously, don't be shy with the questions. We're going to have a whole chunk of time at the end to answer questions. And if it makes sense to answer some midstream, we'll definitely do that. So without any further ado, I'd like to start out with a very practical instance, Catherine, of a fun conversation that we've had in our dating experience. So I'm happy to say that that whether it's because of our Catholic upbringing, we were Catholic our whole lives, although our dad didn't necessarily share the same fervor for Catholicism as our mom. In fact, rarely went to church with us. So we had something of both perspectives in our lives. As Catherine said, the Catholic and also maybe a more secular position on our father's perspective. But yeah, whether it was because of our Catholic upbringing or maybe maybe a particularly more conservative part of the Twin Cities, whether it's our particular personalities, for whatever reason, I definitely would say I have something of a more traditional style when it comes to dating. And yet I also feel like I try to, incorporate some of the wisdom that, or at least the shared styles of dating. We could maybe debate how wise they are in 2022. But yeah, I like to think I have a certain handle on modern dating, while also staying true to maybe my traditional roots, if you will. So we talk about that. Catherine and I, we bounce ideas off of each other. We send screenshots to each other, maybe conversations that we have, whether it's just in texting or off of the dating apps or whatever else. And one particular conversation I think we both enjoyed and maybe even learned from. So Catherine, do you want to give us maybe a little backstory on how that conversation came about?
Yeah, absolutely. So like Isaac was saying, we definitely chat a lot about dates, and Isaac is my older brother. And so he just has had more experience with dating. He kind of entered the scene earlier than I did. So especially when I started off dating, I really went to him for a lot of advice. And one of the biggest things I was experiencing when I was first started dating was, okay, how do you handle the paying on dates scenario? Because yeah, Isaac, like you were saying, I feel like I do have kind of the traditional side of I want to play the feminine role in the partnership. I think men and women are complementary. However, yes, it's 2022, and I also sometimes feel like I'm a feminist at heart. So how does that, real practical scenario play out of, I love that men want to honor women by paying on dates. However, I don't want to feel like I'm expecting that or demanding that of them. So yeah, I just asked Isaac, what should I do in that scenario? The check comes and it's one check. It's, you and me and a guy on the date. What do I do in that scenario? And Isaac, he just gave the perfect walkthrough of the what, like step by step what to do. Okay, so this is what he said. And Isaac, feel free to clarify after I say it if you have any other.
Believe me, I'll feel free to clarify anything this entire time. But
so the check comes, it's put on the table, it's one check, you know, there's two of you there. And so
as if the server's like too scared to even say like, oh, sir, would you like to pay for her this evening?
Yeah, no.
Puts it right down the middle, right in the middle of the table.
Exactly. So he said, okay, reach for your wallet and take your card out and just set it on the edge of the table, just right in front of you. So you're not putting it next to the check. You're not saying, actually verbalizing anything. Just for me as the woman to take out the card, put it on the table. So it's kind of there. And
it's out there.
So that's kind of giving the man one opportunity to say something, to mention anything if he wants to. If nothing is said, then the next step is to put it a little closer. So maybe put it next to the check. Again, not really saying anything. You don't need to offer anything. You don't need to expect anything. Okay, so then the next step would be to put it near the check. And then once the waiter were to come back, if the man still didn't say anything like, hey, I would love to, you know, take care of this. It's on me, whatever. Then when the waiter comes back, you can say, can you please separate the check? And using that word separate, I've used that multiple times and it just really helps of, it's tactful, but also
forceful.
Gets the point across. Okay. So that actually,
separated.
I had to get that far one time on a date. I put it in front of me. He even commented on the kind of card I had. Oh, a Gap card, I see. Because you get points at the Gap when you use this credit card. Anyway, a Gap card, I see. And I'm like, yeah, I really like it. Get points there. But he didn't say anything about paying for the check. So then I move it closer to the check. And then finally at that step, he's like, yeah, I got it. So that has been helpful because I'm not expecting anything. I'm not demanding. I've heard of some women who will say, you know, won't do that whole card thing. They'll just say, thank you so much for dinner, when he hasn't verbalized at all that he's going to pay. I don't do that, but I'm so grateful when a man is willing to pay, but I'd never want to expect that or demand that from him if that hasn't been verbalized. So that's been really helpful to me. An actual, practical tip. Okay, put the card on the table to show that, yep, I'm willing to pay. And then if you need to verbalize to the waiter, can you please separate the checks? Thank you.
Yeah, I love it. And maybe just a quick little background. This whole conversation was in the context of, correct me if I'm wrong, but the fact that I typically pay for a date. I expect to pay for a date. If I ask a woman out on a date, I don't expect her to even have. It really comes down to this. I don't want to have her having to do some sort of calculus in her mind, like, oh, well, you know, how much have I spent going out this week? Can I afford to go out with this guy? Is this guy worth my money or whatever? Regardless of all of it, I want her to feel comfortable and not have to think about any of those things. And the invitation to me to take a woman out on a date includes that. That's just part of the deal. And so that was kind of the background. Catherine knows that about me and my approach. But also at the same time, as she's verbalized, sometimes, there can just be something of a vibe on a date of a woman just kind of maybe feeling a little bit too presumptuous. I don't know exactly how to say. I mean, again, I'm happy to pay regardless, but there can be a vibe sometimes that, oh, well, you're the man, you're paying for this, obviously, or worse yet, you know, if you don't pay for this, this is over. And I think that's part of why I think this is the approach that I recommend to people, women in particular, which is don't lose sight of why, you know, those of us who have traditional values in dating, particularly when it comes to the man paying for the woman, don't lose sight of why that's a thing, why we do that. I think the point, and I could be wrong on this, But I think the point of it is not, oh, the man should pay. That's just the way it is. Women shouldn't have to pay. Men should have to pay. Instead, I think that kind of loses some of the the chivalrous aspect. It loses some of the gentlemanly aspect of it. It loses some of the actual relationship aspect. We talk about relationships in the modern times being somewhat transactional, like, oh, I take you out to dinner. I'm expecting this person to put out for me, to use a crude term. That's transactional, but I also think there's something transactional about, just expecting a man to pay for a meal automatically, without, again, this sense of relationship. So I think of it as, I'm happy to pay for this meal because I want to have a relationship, even if it's just for a meal, and I'm happy to pay for that as something of a gift, if nothing else. And that if it becomes a transaction, then all of a sudden that chivalry, the sensibility to me is just kind of lost. And again, please go.
I would say, and we as women should receive it as such, as a gift, that we shouldn't, just like at Christmas, you don't expect things, but rather you're grateful if you are given a gift. And it's, you're not owed anything, but it's a wonderful gift when someone does give you that.
Yeah, and I would even, I think that's a good example. If you're if you're in a relationship with someone and they don't give you a Christmas gift, like, it's still fair to kind of be like curious about that, like, is he trying to tell me something? Is she, did she forget about Christmas or something? So it's not to say we can't have certain expectations here, but I think even the way that we receive those sorts of interactions on a date, it's important to take a certain approach to it, if that makes sense. So that's one kind of practical example of how Catherine and I have enjoyed being in this dating game together. One maybe interesting part of our sibling relationship in this regard, and you touched on it a moment ago, is you saying that you find yourself somewhat as a feminist at heart. Which I agree with, but I'd also like you to maybe elaborate on that for a second. But also because I also think that, this is I don't think any of us can escape the fact that we are dating in 2022. And as much as CatholicMatch, I think we can all agree is about as traditional as it gets in the online dating world. I mean, this is still online dating. We're using technology to date. We're meeting people, by liking their profile or what have you, sending emojis. It's challenge. I think it's fair to say it's challenging to date in 2022 in general, but it's also challenging to try to balance these sensibilities that may be considered old-fashioned or traditional or whatever. Often, some people would just say, no, that's just good dating etiquette. But yeah, we do live in modern times, and we can't pretend that this is 1950 or Victorian era or what have you. So with that, would you mind elaborating on what you mean by being a feminist at heart, and how maybe you find yourself balancing that with your Catholic faith and with your approach to dating?
Yeah. So to give one example of what I mean by feminist at heart. When I was growing up, I would tell people that what I want to be when I grow up is in the NBA, not in the WNBA, just the NBA, because I want to be in the best of the best, and you don't need to be separated with just the women.
You don't need to sell yourself short to say, like, oh yeah, why couldn't I play one-on-one against LeBron James?
Exactly. So that is one example. But I would say when it comes, so now I've grown up, I'm an adult, come to the dating scene. I would say kind of reconciling or meshing that with a more traditional, Christian understanding of complementarity and the dating scene. I feel like what I think of when I think of those things is I think it's good, again, for men to honor women, especially in the way that they want to honor women. So if that's paying for a date, that's great. Another thing I thought of was, if I could have a captive male audience and let them know my advice for them in dating, especially even from
Which you kind of do right now, by the way.
Especially from a feminist at heart, position. What I would want to say to men is, okay, a lot of men who are kind of have that chivalrous traditional mindset want to say, I want to open doors for women, but in 2022, women will respond, I can open my own door. And what I would say is, I think you should honor women the way you want to and the way you're convicted to. And if a woman receives that, that's a great sign that that's someone you should pursue. She is on the same wavelength as you. She's ready to receive that from you. And if a woman doesn't receive that from you, I think you could say, I think that's a path I don't really need to go down. I think there are a lot of women who will receive the way I want to honor them, and I'm going to go for that. I think that can be a really helpful tool to see if I should pursue this woman or not. I kind of think of this analogy. I have been in the job searching scene for a while, and I saw this really great analogy of, I've been doing a lot of interviews. And in interviews for jobs, I feel like it's like people say, when you're interviewing for a job, you're both seeing if it's a good fit. And if a company is not a good fit for you, you don't necessarily want to be there. And I think it's the same for dating.
Absolutely.
You're just trying to see if they're a good fit for you. Not every single person who exists is going to be a good fit for you, and not every single person you meet is going to be a good fit for you. But if you do align in really important things, that's a great indication you should pursue that. And if someone doesn't receive, what you're putting out there and what you're giving them, that's a good sign. Maybe that's not a person you want to pursue. So yeah, bringing it full circle. As a feminist, even though, there probably was a time in my life where I'm like, I can open my own door. I thankfully, because of you, Isaac, because of other honorable men in my life, have shown me that you can open your own door. But the men in your life want to honor you by being chivalrous, by showing these beautiful manly traits to honor and care for women. And we can accept that. And if a woman doesn't accept that, she might just not be the right fit for you.
Never have I ever looked at a woman and thought, oh, I'm not sure she can open this door for herself.
Yeah.
She needs me, who is obviously stronger and more large and assertive. It like, really, I mean, I can see again, maybe it's because some of these relationships have sort of devolved into transactional things like, oh, well, I'll open the door for this woman and then she'll feel protected and then I will win her heart. And then, I mean, it's not that easy. And frankly, you shouldn't be doing even acts of chivalry like that because, that's going to win you points or whatever. Hopefully that comes naturally to you, that you want to be a servant. And it's possible that these women who, maybe even yourself, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's possible that maybe some of that instinct comes from, just kind of a breakdown in some of these relationships and the interactions. So let's turn the table a little bit. There is a question that I thought was particularly maybe poignant at this point in time. What about the other way around? Okay, so a man does pay for your first date, Catherine.
Mm-hmm.
And pays for the second date, and pays, is obviously happy to let you leave your wallet at home. Do you, at what point do you, if ever, are you thinking to yourself, well, no, I mean, if we're going to have a relationship, I'm happy to pitch in. In fact, this particular question from one of our live viewers said, actually, my girlfriend is demanding that she pay and doesn't want me to pay, at certain times, if not all the time. I'm actually curious to find out more about that relationship, but we'll just take it at face value at this point. So in that case, at what point are you happy to pay? Are you trying to, make it more of a two-way street? How do you navigate that further along the line?
Yeah. I'm going to be honest. I am happy to receive if a man wants to pay, but I am also happy to pay. And I would say I probably lean toward, okay, he paid the last time. I am going to actually be a little bit more vocal about, hey, I would love to get this. And I do think that comes from I'm not trying to expect anything from you, demand anything from you. If you are going to give a gift, I want it to be freely given, but I don't want you to feel like you have to always pay for everything. So if he did pay the last time, the next time I am going to be a little bit more vocal of, I would love to get this. And sometimes they say, okay. And then sometimes they say, no, I'm happy to get this. I have been in a couple serious relationships, and one in particular, he actually didn't have a job. So it did turn out that I would pay maybe more. And
More
I was
than you
happy.
otherwise would.
What's that?
More than you otherwise would.
Yeah. And I was happy to do that because I did have a job and we were in a relationship. So that was a unique situation. So that happened.
No, that's good. I appreciate that. One of the, I'll give one real life example. One time I bought dinner for a woman, and then we were gonna meet at a museum, and by the time I got there, she had already bought our tickets for us on our second date, and I was fully prepared, to buy mine, to buy hers, to buy her snacks, whatever was going to happen that day. I was planning to do that. And also knowing me and where I come from in Minnesota, we do this little dance. Somebody offers to pay for something, I have to be like, oh, no, don't do that. And then sometimes the other person feels compelled to be like, oh, no, please let me. And then you're kind of like, how many times do I need to refuse this gift before it's okay for me to accept this gift? And in this case, it was actually, it was refreshing. It was kind. It was all of the things, like the assertiveness. She was just like, yeah, here, I got your ticket. And I was just like, hell, all right. Let's look at some art together. So yeah, I think even if if you consider yourself a traditionally minded person when it comes to dating, don't let yourself be too traditional that you would close yourself off to opportunities like that, because that was honestly like a surprisingly cool experience. That wouldn't have happened if I was like, I must buy these tickets in advance because she will not pay for anything this entire time, So I think it is good to just kind of have if nothing else, an open mind when it comes to these things, and kind of take it as it comes on a case by case basis.
Yeah, that might be a takeaway I would want to share from my dating experience, and especially where I am today, is exactly what you said, Isaac. You might have hopes and expectations, but just being very open to the actual person in front of you, and to not close yourself off to anything that might happen in that relationship, but being open to, okay, this is a particular person. This isn't some idea I've had about dating.
Yep.
And then the next step would be to verbalize and to communicate about that. Okay, I'm seeing this guy. He seems like a great guy. He never pays for dates. Maybe let's have a conversation about that. Maybe he doesn't have a job. Maybe he wants to pay, but women have always turned him down. Maybe he doesn't want to pay. Man, that would be so informative to just have that conversation of where you're coming from. That's just one example. So I might say a takeaway I have from dating and would want to move forward with as well is, great to have your hopes and expectations, but just verbalize that with the person you're actually encountering.
Love it. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. One of the things I've admired about you, Catherine, in your dating life is an experiment that you did with the help of I believe it was a book that you read. I don't know how that was introduced, and maybe you want to give a little background on that. But I think in particular for those of us who do the online dating thing, and also I think even when it comes to those of us who, maybe we have in our minds a very clear idea, clear picture of who we want to date and who we want to end up marrying someday. And for whatever reason, that hasn't quite worked out, or at least as immediate as we'd like. So I'm happy to say, or I'm happy to share at least that, when I started dating, I thought this would be a pretty quick and easy process that I would just simply, make myself available to the world of Catholic women, and that would be about all I needed to do. And I've dated some really great women and some beautiful women. I've actually come very close to getting married. I was engaged once upon a time. And I also will share. I don't know how happy I am to share. Is I've experienced a lot of failure when it comes to dating, and a lot of things that have kind of like made me think like maybe I am doing it wrong. So if nothing else, and I'm going to shut up and let you talk. But if nothing else, I really appreciate you willing to kind of take an approach outside of the box and something that you maybe wouldn't have thought up on your own. But with that, could you tell us about I believe it's called the 30-day experiment?
Okay, so it's actually 6 months.
That's way longer than I thought. And
Okay, so to give some backstory, I didn't date much in high school or college. And I had a very similar idea, Isaac. Like I was going to meet someone very young. We were going to get married immediately. And that was that. And that
so our older sister literally got married at age 21.
Yep.
So, I mean, I'm sure that entered into our timeline preparation. Like, I guess I better get ready to be married in the next, 30 minutes.
Yep. So didn't date much in high school and college. So then I find myself outside of college thinking, man, I want to be dating. And it's funny because, Isaac, actually your friend recommended this book to you. And then when I was sharing where I was, then you said, hey, my friend has been recommending this book to me. Maybe you should read it.
I don't remember any of that.
I pulled it off my bookshelf. It's called How to Get a Date Worth Keeping. How to Be Dating in 6 Months or Your Money Back, which is a facetious title. But, okay, so it's a 6-month dating program that is just meant to help you get out there to meet people of value and character, and then, hopefully enter a relationship from that. So it's really cool because it's very practical. So the first thing is they say, just be open. So the way you do this, they say, the author, is put yourself out there, talk to anyone you meet. The little old lady in line at the grocery store behind you, the person sitting next to you on the airplane, anybody. And so you're not just, I really like that idea too, because you're not just focusing your life on, okay, finding a date or finding someone to marry, but rather I'm just going to be open. That's a really good thing to encounter other people wherever we go. As a result of COVID, a lot of us have kind of gotten into our shell a little bit more. So this is really good to just encounter other people, see where the Lord is going to work wherever. So that's the first step. Put yourself out there, be open, talking to lots of people. So then once you do encounter someone you might be interested in dating, you're just kind of more well-versed in being open, talking to them, that kind of thing. So that was
conversational skills.
Exactly. Right? So good. The second takeaway that was really helpful was whenever you do meet someone who you might be interested in, always leave them with a way to get a hold of you. So this was definitely going to put a lot of us outside of our comfort zone, but very helpful and practical if you actually are wanting to date. So this could look like something, okay, you met someone at coffee and donuts after mass, you're chatting with them.
I love donuts.
Before you leave, hey, Bob, I really enjoyed our conversation. I would love to continue this over coffee. Here's my business card. Here's my number. just kind of a follow-up. It doesn't have to be me asking him out, but rather just showing interest, but giving him a way to get a hold of me. So giving a business card, a number. If you're on Facebook, you might say, hey, I'm a part of this group on Facebook that's relevant to what we were talking about. Can I add you to that group? Different things like that. So that was one practical tip that I learned in this book as well.
So I'll interject for a second there. Two things I think are really, really helpful that I've experienced in my own life. Number one is the whole like asking somebody out on a date. At least at one point in my life was really kind of a daunting thing, and I've made a couple of videos of this now because I think it's something other people do struggle with or have struggled with. And it really doesn't have to be this whole big song and dance. I think it can be simply as simple as what you say, which is, I've been enjoying this conversation. Let's do it again. Looks like they're closing up coffee and donuts. Too bad. Would you want to walk down to the next, coffee shop down the street, or let's continue this again some other time. So yeah, it sometimes it is very helpful to be, even more explicit about, I would like to take you out on a date. Sometimes you need to do that. But most of the time, I think it can be just much more natural and seemingly innocuous. And then the other thing is, there's a lot of times I'm kind of like, I'd love to continue this conversation. I'm not sure I want to take you out on a date. And it might just be because I don't know if I'm ready to ask somebody out on a date, anybody. I don't know if this person's even single. But I've enjoyed this, and the business card in particular is kind of a nice, like, okay, well, here's a way to get a hold of me. And it might just be for business networking, and it might be for some sort of serious date, or it might be somewhere in between. You can kind of both just figure it out as you go. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So maybe one particular part about your experiment, Catherine, that if you wouldn't mind just touching on briefly, and then maybe we'll look at some more questions, is I remember specifically you saying that you were being challenged to go out with people that maybe you weren't normally your type, if you will, or somebody who, maybe previously, before you read your book that I apparently recommended to you, before you did all that, maybe you wouldn't have even bothered going out with them. But there was a reason to do that. Can you just touch briefly on that?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. That's also a really great part. So the author talks about, so the author is a Christian psychologist. So he definitely has a lot of actual, factual, experiential information to back up this whole dating program. Yeah. So he talks about this idea of a type. That's okay if you naturally find yourself attracted to, someone of a certain hair color, body type, profession, that type of thing. It's almost like emotions. Like, you can't help your emotions, but it's what you do with that is important. So it's okay if you find yourself attracted to a type, but let's just look at hair color. Let's be honest. Is someone's hair colored? Is that actually an indication of how good of a marriage spouse they're going to be? Well, not really. Are they going to be loyal, faithful, loving, sacrificial? Yeah, your hair color is going to indicate that. So just looking at these things that we have as types and things that we look for, that's okay if you're naturally attracted to that. But is that actually going to be an indication of if they're a good partner? And then also the psychologist author talks about there actually might be a reason we have a type. There's kind of that adage or old saying of, a lot of us are attracted to our similar characteristics of our parent. That might be a good thing. I had an amazing dad. I find myself attracted to people who, represent his characteristics. But man, I had a difficult upbringing. I find that I'm not really, having chemistry with people who kind of remind me of that parent who had a difficult upbringing with. So that's really good to note too, that the author says, of, maybe where that type is coming from. So the advice from the book is just talking about it's okay if you have a type, but maybe be open to going out with people who don't quite fit that type. If the type that you have, hair color, eye color, height, isn't actually going to be an indication of if they're going to be a good spouse or not.
Yeah, I mean, blondes are still going to be best, but I respect your perspective, I guess. So there are a couple. Just kidding. There are a couple of questions that kind of deal with the same sort of thing. So I'd like to discuss those for a moment. And they might not seem totally related at the beginning, but I'll tie a loop on them. So there's a couple of them that deal with, I'm sending messages on CatholicMatch and I'm just not getting responses. Turns out this person deleted their account, or this person, it's not even clear that they're checking their messages anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And another question was, is it possible to fall in love with somebody long distance before you even meet them? You might be wondering, what on earth could those two things be connected? Well, here's my point. I would say it's totally possible for you to fall for somebody, whether it's just a profile or whether it's somebody that you're talking to long distance. We can fall in love in a sense with a celebrity without ever meeting them. But if you're asking, can you really share, like, can you be in love together? I'm not so sure that that's true. So it's really a matter of, and I think it's worth making distinctions between falling in love and actually being in love and actually loving somebody and actually being in a loving relationship. My recommendation for both is to use a term, guard your heart, before you actually meet somebody. Another way of saying that is, this could be a catfish for all you know. This could be somebody who actually presented themselves perfectly accurately, but by the time you actually meet them, there's just not the same sort of chemistry. So I have a simple bit of advice that I offer to people, particularly if someone ever shows me a profile, like, whoa, look at this person. This is my perfect spouse that I'm going to obviously message, and they're going to fall for me, and we're going to get married within 6 months or however fast the priest will allow us to get married. My recommendation is, well, first of all, have you messaged this person? Have they responded? To put it bluntly, don't get excited about somebody that you haven't even messaged yet. So you can be excited to send a message to somebody. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you can't have excitement there. But really, all you're excited about so far is the fact that this profile exists, which also realistically might disappear before the next time you log in. Same sort of thing with a long distance communique. I think there's appropriate excitement levels, and even you might even feel a connection to this person, butterflies, all of the trappings of being in love. But until you really have a one-on-one human interaction, I would say, don't fall for them. Just simply, I think it can be just an act of will that you have to prevent. So, Catherine, anything to add to that? And in particular, I think it's kind of a nice contrast to what you were just talking about. On the one hand, maybe you've learned in your life that you have to be more open to people or dating a certain type or however. But any thoughts there? And also, if you've ever had to deal with the other side of the coin, which is, sometimes we're tempted to get excited about somebody before maybe it's time.
Yep. Yeah, the main thing I would add is just to definitely encourage everyone, including myself, to, if you do get excited and meet someone online, to try to meet in person as soon as possible. Not too soon, because I have done that. Maybe meeting too soon from meeting someone online that you haven't even talked as often as maybe you should. But also, if you are getting excited, if you're making plans, if you find that you're not really wanting to date anyone else, just before you get too far, I think it's really important to meet in person, because that's going to be so telling. If they are a good match for you, what their character is, how you interact, what both of your levels of interest and investment are. I think that can be really telling too. If someone just wants to stay talking online, that could be a good indication that maybe they're not ready for an in-person relationship, or they're just not as invested as you are. So I would encourage,
maybe they're going out with somebody else in real life, but they're happy to message you.
Yep, exactly. So I would just encourage you to kind of maybe check with other people around you who know you and who care about you. Hey, do you think this is too soon to meet up with someone, or do you think this is a good amount of time to meet up with someone in person? But I would just encourage you, before you get too excited or make any plans for the future, to meet in person, I think, is always the best bet before moving forward too quickly.
Yeah, you talk about meeting somebody too quickly. I'm happy to say that I'm also the type that, until you really meet somebody in real life, it's just hard to know how or if this is ever going to go anyplace. So yeah, I think it's a good thing to just to realize that, but also to read the signs. Is this person? Do you have enough data? First of all, it could just be like, oh, this person's messaging me back and they have nice pictures. We should go out right away, and then there have been times I show up and I was like, oh yeah, okay, so this is what this person looks like. And what do we talk about now? It's not clear that we have any chemistry. So, you really do want to develop that ahead of time. And maybe I'll just touch on one thing I saw in the comments. There particularly with CatholicMatch, there's obviously this ability to search outside of our immediate vicinity, and then it's a matter of, okay, well, are we going to do something long distance? Are we going to someone going to fly out, or someone going to drive a distance? And Catherine, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're both in the agreement that, you still want to meet as soon as possible. But of course, that's a different level of commitment, to spend time and money in a way that you just simply wouldn't have to if you lived in the same town or neighborhood.
Yeah.
I'm a believer that if you really feel like this is a person you really want to meet and they don't live around you, consider taking a vacation where they live. Talk it over with them. Tell them you're thinking about taking a vacation, and you like the idea of taking it in their general vicinity, and it would be nice to meet them while you're there, as opposed to, okay, I have decided I want to visit you and go out with you on a 4 to 5 day courtship first date. That could very well just be too much, even if you're a perfect match. So I think, especially when it comes to online dating, yes, this in some ways goes against my traditional sensibility sometimes, but sometimes it's just best to make the first meeting as casual as possible. You don't even need to call your first date. You can call it, I like to call it date zero, actually, because if you meet somebody, even if you meet someone for 5 minutes at the coffee shop or at the grocery store or at Donut Sunday, you have so many more data points in real life, even in just a few minutes, than if you had paragraph upon paragraph of a CatholicMatch profile or any other profile. Sometimes you just need to meet them and say hello. And then when you know that, maybe you have, okay, yeah, I like this person in real life, in addition to I like their profile online. Which, of course, it's a complicated thing to go out of state or even especially out of the country, to do that. But anyway, you can just kind of take the pressure off of that first meeting. And frankly, that might mean that you go out on a first date for an hour and a half for happy hour after you've flown halfway across the country. You're feeling it. Maybe they're not feeling it. And that's okay. You're on vacation. You can do whatever you can go to the beach. But don't put pressure on yourself to make that the end all be all. This has to work out. We have to spend the weekend together, and don't put pressure on this other person. Give them the opportunity to meaningfully opt out of that first meeting.
Mm-hmm. And one step I found that was especially prevalent during COVID and quarantine that can be helpful too is to video chat or FaceTime first too, because I think that is almost like the next best thing to traveling to wherever you might need to do. So I even love that for people, like I said, during COVID, people in town. It was really nice to chat with them first on video call, because just like what you're saying, Isaac, you kind of get more data points. You get a feel for their personality a little bit more, how you interact. So that was really helpful too. So I definitely would encourage people when they're online dating, bring that up, mention that, hey, I've enjoyed messaging you, would love to jump on a video call to get to know you more.
Great. So we're nearing the end of our time. I just want to give you a 5 or 8 minute warning here for our audience. If you have any questions, throw those into the chat. We do have one question. Catherine, can you type into the chat the name and author of the book that you're describing, so people can look it up if you want? One thing that I wanted to say, and I've already forgotten it, is okay. So you're talking about the FaceTime thing and how that helpful. I actually think it's really helpful just to talk on the phone.
Yeah.
And there have been more than one time now that I talked on the phone with somebody and it just kind of felt off on the phone. But I was like, oh, no. This person is so attractive in their photos. And we had such chemistry while we were texting that it couldn't possibly be that we aren't meant for each other just because we didn't have a great phone conversation. And at least once, if not more than once, I meet this person. I'm like, oh, yeah, we do not match up. And that was actually fairly obvious on the phone, but, because I wasn't ready to give up at that point. So, yeah, I just think it's really important, whether you're online dating, whether you meet somebody briefly, that you take a healthy approach to the fact that, yes, we have marriage on our mind. And as Catholics, I think that's really good. Like, nobody should be dating if they're not at least, seeing that as an end goal. But there are so many sign points along the way, including, do I like talking to this person? Do we have anything to talk about? Do we have a sense of humor that we at least like?
Yes.
Oh yeah, you were saying a joke then, weren't you? Like, maybe that wasn't the funniest thing to me, but at least I knew, like, okay, you're kind of joking. And a lot of that stuff is what?
I was just gonna say, there's another question I want to respond to.
All right, well, I guess we'll just drop everything and let you respond to that.
Okay, so there's a question. Please comment on the 60 and older people who are still wanting to get married or at least have a girlfriend or boyfriend, besides saying you have to get yourself out there. So I think my response could apply to just, anyone who still wants to get married. I think what I've found that's really helpful in this time before we find our permanent vocation, which I think a lot of us on CatholicMatch hope is marriage, but we don't know for sure yet, maybe. I would say just do things you enjoy. And a lot of people who have gotten married have said that's a great way to meet people who are a good marriage potential because they enjoy doing the same things. And similarly, a lot of people who have gotten married have said doing service or ministry in areas that you feel particularly drawn to is a great way to meet people who are, like-minded, who might be a good match. And then I also was having a conversation with another single friend, and we were talking about how, so she was saying, when I get married, man, it's going to be a real transition to really have to give your life over to your spouse. And then when you have kids, that's going to be really difficult. And I just have been thinking about how, man, if the universal call to holiness is for all of us to just love and to give of ourselves, I think we as single people could do that now. I don't think we need to wait for a permanent vocation. So my advice to those of us who aren't in a permanent vocation would be, let's try to give of ourselves now in ways that we enjoy and we kind of see fit for our life right now. And then if and when we do get married, praise God, we will have had that practice of giving ourselves. And if we don't get married, praise God, because we did not waste our time, our single years, waiting until I'm in a permanent vocation to give of myself. No, I spent this single time giving of myself as well. So I would say, yeah, to whatever age you are, if you're still waiting for your permanent vocation, I would say, man, let's all not waste this time. Let's give of ourselves, and we can give of ourselves in ways that we enjoy.
Love it. I'm smiling because I'm enjoying what you're saying, and also because I have half of an eye on the chat right now. And I agree. A raid also usually involves sirens, particularly an air raid, but I don't have any particular experience with that. So we're about out of time. There's one topic I wanted to make sure that we talked about before we left, and so I'm going to conclude with one particular thing that I've benefited from our relationship, Catherine, when it comes to talking about relationships, and then maybe I'll turn it over to you so you can get the last word in this evening.
Finally.
So I'll say a quick little bit. I'll turn it over to Catherine, and then I'll close this up for the evening. So one thing that has come up very recently for Catherine and I, and as we were discussing, what we might talk about this evening, it just occurred to me that regardless of how many different people I meet and how many conversations I have and how many of these videos or articles that I make, I'm constantly learning and maybe even relearning things about how this whole dating thing works. And in particular, because women are so vastly different than us. And that's not to say we're not the same, and that's not to say we aren't complementary. But the way we think about things is often just very different. And one thing in particular that I'll say is not only are women, different from men, but women are different from each other. Okay. And the woman that you talk to on the internet, this week is going to be different than the one the next week. You send a message to this woman and to the next, they may receive the exact same message differently.
Yep.
So what I've learned and what I want to kind of leave with our audience this evening is that take each person as an individual person with their own experiences and their own lack of experiences, with their own strengths and weaknesses, with their own expectations and your own expectations and all the above. And if you run into something in one of your conversations, whether it's on the dating app, whether it's in real life, whether you've been dating for a week or for a month or for a year, and it just kind of rubs you the wrong way, or it's not exactly how you wanted this person to pay immediately for the dinner on a first date, or exactly how you wanted, the first kiss to go, or however it works out. I would just encourage our audience today, and I'm speaking also to myself because I'm still learning these things, to ask for this person's perspective on this particular thing, and to be open to listening, and also to be open to the fact that maybe this person has a differing perspective than you, and that maybe that's not necessarily wrong. It might not be the best match for you, but that it might just be that their expectations are different, and all it might take for you to come together is to understand each other's expectations and to adjust accordingly. Before you judge, you might initially be like, I don't like the way that just happened. I didn't like that last date. I didn't like that conversation. Bring that to this person, discuss it, and then just kind of go from there. You can make judgments then at that point. But that's kind of where I would like to leave the conversation from my standpoint, which is I would encourage you to take something of a humility into relationships, that maybe the way that you've done things and maybe the way that you've experienced things, maybe even your own expectations for how things are going to go, maybe isn't how it exactly needs to be.
That's good.
And now, Catherine, for our last word on the evening.
Well, I would say actually I'm going to say something very similar, but maybe from a female perspective. Isaac, I think the biggest thing that I've benefited from our many conversations about our dating experiences, I've really enjoyed getting to see your perspective of the women that you spend time with, go out with, talk to on CatholicMatch, whatever, is that I think a lot of us women don't realize men do think very differently. So generally, this is a generalization. Generally, when women are talking to women, we understand each other more. We think kind of the same things. We are in the same way. We expect the same things. So when we're talking to each other, we get each other. That can be very different when we're talking to men, especially in the dating scene. And so I feel like, as what I've seen with our conversations, is that a lot of women think men can read our minds, because when we talk to women, they sort of can, because we do think in very similar ways. So I would say that's my biggest takeaway and thing I'm grateful for that I've learned from you, Isaac, and your dating interactions that you've shared with me, is that women, men can't read our minds, and we need to verbalize expectations and wants. One very practical example recently I heard about, this woman was going on dates with this guy, and she felt like when she was in a certain time of her cycle, she thought, man, I would really like it for my boyfriend to give me flowers and chocolate. And this friend who was telling me this story said, does he know that you are in this time of your cycle? Does he know that you want chocolate and flowers? She's like, no, he should know. Maybe in an ideal world, when everything is perfect, he would, but they just can't.
I'm not sure he would, even in that perfect world, but go on.
Men just can't know. So I think while the movies, the romantic movies, help us think that men just know and they show up doing everything that we want, I don't think that's reality. I think what's going to help us all in this pursuit of finding a holy spouse is going to be verbalizing our expectations and our wants. And that's okay if you have to verbalize that to a man. What might be more telling is if a man receives that and acts on that. If he makes changes based on what we share, if he wants to honor us in those ways, how do they receive that verbalization? But they just can't read our mind.
You might even say it's actually a better sign of your future relationship success that he is happy to listen to you and adjust accordingly, then he can simply maybe even just coincidentally do something that you like.
Yeah, exactly.
Love it. Thanks so much, Catherine, for being here. Catherine, by the way, and I'm going to plug her. I meant to say more about this earlier, but we need to talk. I need to at least share. Catherine is a fashion designer in San Diego, and she designs swimsuits. And they're beautiful. They're unique. They're sustainable. And they're made from I'm happy to say a Catholic perspective with a sense of Christian dignity, that beauty is good, but also sometimes you just don't find the coverage that you're looking for. Correct me if I'm wrong. When you're looking for a swimsuit. So I love my sister. I would love her even if she was not talented, but she is very talented. Check out her swimsuits at sienaco.com. I'm going to have her put that into the chat because they're awesome swimsuits. She's coming out with a new line very soon.
Very soon.
And I'm excited to see them. And I'm excited to see you continue to thrive. even if it's from 2,000 miles away, Kath. But I'm grateful for you and for our relationship, for your perspective on dating, for your talent, but also just for being my baby sister, my favorite baby sister, actually.
Thanks, Isaac. It's been great.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. We're going to do this again about a month from now with a new topic, a new guest. Check out our videos on youtube.com. We've got a CatholicMatch channel. We also do reels on Instagram as well. And please tune in a month from now. And in the meantime, God bless you all and happy dating.